let's move on to the second talk. And we're going to have Matt Bunkers come on and represent the CWIP team, which was formerly the TWIP, the Tornado Warning Improvement Project that we all are familiar with here in the Central Region. And they do fantastic work. They generate such excellent training material and refreshers and cutting edge science from research community to and moving into operations. They do just a fantastic job. And Matt's going to represent the CWIP today to talk about the training effectiveness survey they did last year. So Matt, thanks so much for joining us today, and go ahead and take it away.
All right, thank you very much, Randy. And as Randy indicated, we changed our name in November of 2021 to the Convective Warning Improvement Project Team, which we call the SWIP or the CWIP. We used to be the TWIP, which focused mostly, well, exclusively just on tornadoes, but in part because of the big Iowa derecho in 2020, we added to our focus also high-end wind and hail events. So a little bit of background there. We conducted a survey last spring, and so this is going to be a rather quick or short presentation giving a high-level overview of those results. We thank you for completing, those of you that completed that survey, and we'll give you a little bit of information on how you might want to take some of these results into the operations area. I want to give a big shout out to Keith Sherburne, also on the SWIP team, who did a bulk of the analysis of the results and also putting this presentation together. So really what we wanted to find out from the survey is how are we doing as a team? Is, for example, is the training sufficient? Is recovering all the topics that you need, and are there areas that we could improve upon? And again, that was conducted for a couple weeks last spring. In terms of the survey, we had 92 total responses covering 28 of the 38 Central Region WFOs, so a pretty good sample there. And it's important to point out that some offices are kind of on the fringe of where the more active severe weather is, so it's not surprising necessarily that not everybody had responses for that. So again, we're using the survey as a roadmap going forward for the team on the types of training that we should be delivering and how we might deliver that training. So in terms of the responses, about 75%, actually 75% were operational forecasters with warning responsibility, GS 11, 12 and the leads. In terms of the GS 5 through 9, we had no responses, and that kind of makes sense since those are the newer staff members, maybe not issuing many warnings or not really involved in warnings at all. And then just under a quarter were mostly from the SU, MIC, WCM type of ranks. I do want to point out that in the following slides, on the results that I show you, the results could be a little bit skewed because of offices that have several respondents to the survey and other offices who don't have any responses. So just kind of keep that in the back of your mind. In terms of our first question is, how is this training being used? We had some positive results that we wanted to point out. Most notably, the SWIP and TWIP training has been a common theme of workshops. So 72 out of 92 is roughly 78%. So high level there. It's also discussed in operations quite a bit, used in event reviews and research, and becoming more a part of operations culture. So that was a key takeaway for us. There are still some places where maybe we would like to see it a little bit more involved, and specifically being discussed before severe weather events would be advantageous, we think, and just getting more discussion in the operations area. Otherwise, if we look at the, okay, I skipped a slide there. So backing up, in terms of how has the SWIP training improved your operations, there's a pretty clear signal that it's helped with QLCS understanding and warnings the most, as you can see here with these, the three highest responses. And then on the other end of the spectrum, the lowest improvement has been in terms of land spouts. And that, again, that kind of makes sense because their land spouts are less common than QLCS tornadoes or supercell tornadoes. They're not as widespread across the region. So definitely more of a challenge. And then finally, we had some lower yes answers for false alarm ratio and warning lead time. I do want to point out that the SWIP team is looking into that, but it's partially a sample size issue. We haven't been really around long enough to really see how the effects of the training can properly be measured, but that's something we do plan to look at in the future. Also keep in mind there are a lot of commingling factors when it comes to tornado warnings. It's not just the amount of training, it's also the science and all the things that go into the warnings in terms of our knowledge of the environment and the spotter reports, et cetera. So it's hard to disentangle just solely the effects of the TWIP or the SWIP training on the false alarm ratio and warning lead time. So in terms of how much training have we been providing and does it apply? So on this left graph, we see that very few respondents said the SWIP training does not apply to their CWA, and perhaps not surprising, even though it's only at 10%, the highest response of not applying was towards land spot training. As far as the graphic on the right, this is really good for the SWIP team to gauge our training going forward. It looks like we've been up to this point providing just the right amount of training, not too much or not too little. But it's also important to note for us as a team that we don't want to shift the category from just right over to too much, and there's just a few more respondents for too much versus too little. So we really need to keep, internally calibrating ourselves so we keep the amount of training just right. In terms of what the respondents said for the most effective training, clearly the reference guides and sheets are viewed most favorably, with 62 responses for most effective and an average rating of 4.6 out of 5. Next, of importance were West cases and simulations, so the hands-on type of training. And then lower than that, but still better than the other options that were available, were GR2 and AWIPS color tables, training modules and videos, and even radar feature catalogs, which are generally very short, quick hitting, but can be a good refreshers before an event. So in terms of all the comments that were provided, this is what you indicated, the surveys indicated for hazards that they wanted to be looked at and what kind of resources were favorable. So a big thing, again, was the straight line wind. And again, that's what resulted in the expansion of the TWIP team to the SWIP team to include straight line wind and hail. I have a red check mark here just to point out that we recently have released some tools related to straight line wind forecasting. That's the thunderstorm wind gust ratio tool that should have been installed with a recent tech order at your office. So you should have all the tools and the training materials for that. Just go ahead and see your Sue about that. There's also been a ask for examples from other regions, and we have recently included a little bit of that. Another big thing was a request for effective warnings and polygonology related to that, WIA considerations and IBW tags. There is some training in the works for that. Other topics here include strategies for poor radar coverage, which is certainly a challenge for a large part of our region, especially on the more northern and western fringes of the area. There was also several requests for local effects, and I will point out that our team really wasn't chartered for specifically looking at local effects, but if there is something that you have that's of concern, please reach out to the team and we'll be glad to try to address that. Of course, the team does do specific event reviews or case event reviews. We've had people reach out to the team and ask us to give us our assessment of a particularly challenging situation. So that would certainly fall under this category of looking at local effects. In terms of the resources that you really want to see based on the survey, the hands-on examples really are what people find very useful, along with case studies, maybe so-called storm of the month reviews, additional radar catalogs, and kind of along the lines where you make the call, where we present a short example and you have to make a decision. So that's something that's been indicated, as well as a continuation of the quick reference guides. So I'd just like to finish by saying thank you for all of you who contributed to the survey, even if you didn't take it, but you gave ideas to somebody who did. We really appreciate that and guiding our team going forward. And as far as a takeaway for you for operations, I think the key thing you can do is before you have a convective event, so the morning of a bigger day that might be happening, just go to the CWIP resources page and maybe look at a few things just to jog your memory, whether you're dealing with QLCS tornadoes that day or maybe even land spouts. Just bring those resources to the front of your mind so you're ready for that day. And I think that's a good way to apply a lot of the tools that we have provided. And so I will leave it right there.
Great, thanks so much, Matt. If you have any questions, for Matt, please raise your hand or type it into the questions pane or chat, and we will ask them. Matt, I love what you're talking about there as far as the just-in-time training, the refresher type use of the material. I think that's just such a powerful way to use the great resources that you all have put together. And I've seen some good examples from SUs that have done that. So just kind of take Matt's words to heart. If you're a radar program leader, science officer, or just anybody that's heading into a severe weather event, as a reminder to take a look at some of their training material to refresh your memory before you head into potential big events. So any questions or comments for Matt or the SWIP team, please raise your hand or type in the questions pane. Okay, Matt, nothing seen. Thanks so much for the update.